Okay, starting. So, I'm going to begin the project today, begin a video today with Xcode. And in Xcode, I'm choosing the old project in a Novillo that I have one of the two simulators that we saw last time. And I'll get it up and running. And when I've got the project chosen, which you'll notice is the same one I've been looking at for a while, I'm going to move to the composition and we'll start swiping. And what we see is just what we've been seeing. It's the same thing. Just a reminder of what is in there. This project is now an older project because there's a new one we'll be looking at. And I want to, before we look at the new one, look at how this one is structured. So bringing up the interface, if I look in here, I can see that in this picker area, which is the kind of place right inside what I'm going to edit, I have 3 blocks that are defined. And those blocks are in this list here, which is the blocks pane. And there's actually 4 there, but 3 of them are part of my composition. They've been added to the composition, and they contain things that I want in the composition. The 4th one is a default one I didn't use. Back in the composition, we can see the correspondence. So there they are. Those are the 3 that we're using in here. And they contain components, elements of the overall composition. On the right side of the picker, we can see that we have another list, which is files. And there's a lot of them. In fact, there's 18 of these. And there's one for each panel. There's one for each kind of hint, which is the element that shows up before the rest of the artwork does. And there's 6 artwork ones. So there are 6 times 3 different elements, 18 different elements, each one of which is a separate file somewhere. And they've all been imported via my GitHub into this project. So why 18? Well, because that's how many elements ended up being edited or modified or having their attributes changed in the project itself. You know, the lines draw onto the panels, the little hint components fade up or draw on, and then the rest of the artwork will draw on or do whatever it does. But I had 18 different elements, 6 panels and 3 components in each that I wanted to edit. And so I had to create, for this initial demo, 18 different files. So let me go back to Xcode now, and I'm going to rerun, but with a different iPad simulator. And this one has a different project on it. So we'll get that up and running. Now I'm opening up this new project, and when I do, I'm not going to go straight to swiping. I'm actually going to take a look at the listing of the media. So you might remember what we just saw was in the listing of the media, there were 18 different files. We know what they were for. But here there's only one. You can see these have SVG at the end of them like the other one did. That means it's a file. Because we only have one file imported, and I didn't need multiple groups to organize it in the way that I did in the previous project, so I only have one group. And I put that image into that group, and then I imported that group into the composition. So when I go into the composition, I see something very simple. We'll do that right here, which is just this picker showing the block, the corresponding file, and that's it in the picker area. Right? In the background, I can see the image that's composed of all these elements, so I know what that image was. It has all those elements in it. We're familiar with all those from before. So now what happens when I start swiping here? Actually, nothing happens at all. But there is a subtle difference that I want to draw your attention to. And that difference is actually really important, and it's the point of this video today. If we look at what's on the screen right now, and just to sort of say this before, Novillo colors all the objects that have not had any attributes changed orange. So just treat that orange as sort of the unchanged elements. And if we look, we can see that there's some elements that are not orange or not the same orange. You can see that in the left top in panel 1, the remainder of the cup is. Then we can see the hints in all the other ones, the kind of doorknob part in 3, the line of the chair, the doorway in the center. It's a little hard to see them, but they are there. The egg and the frying pan, and the wheel and the road on the car. So somehow, even though I don't have individual files to make changes to, I've been able to make changes to these components inside this single file. Okay, so just to make the point and to be clear, they don't change when they swipe, but they do have this initial condition set. And I remember a few videos ago I was talking about initial conditions and how important they were for setting this up. So these have had their initial conditions, or initial color in this case, set. Okay, I'm going to go back for a second and look at the first project. No, it's not too confusing. And you can see that by contrast, I want to make the point that there are indeed these 18 files. There they are. If I want to make a change to a corresponding section, I select the file that I want to modify as the basis. And when I want to make a change, I generate a thread for it, and then I can make the changes that cause things to draw on and so forth. This is the old project with 18 different files in it. To clarify what's going on behind the scenes, let's take a look right now at the files themselves. So what we're looking at right now is the file in the new project in Affinity Designer, which is a vector drawing program, which I use a lot. And you can see a direct correspondence to what's in the new project. There's the file, mostly in orange, elements that have been modified in different colors. But you can see that there's a correspondence of all the elements on the screen in the development. Now let's go back to Affinity again, and we can see that the single file import of the new project has a whole lot of layers in it. They're listed in this listing right here. And this is sort of the equivalent of the different files, but it's all contained inside of one file. I only have one thing to import, but it contains these different structural elements inside of it. And each of those corresponds to one of the items that I animate. Back in Novillo, going back again, you can see that there's this panel that has been added down here in the picker area, and this is in the new project. And these are all the layers in the selected drawing, or actually in the project altogether. So I only have one drawing, so these are all the layers in that one drawing. Now, if you do much digital drawing, you almost certainly use layers, so you'll know what these are. If not, play along. By contrast, if we go back to Affinity Designer again and see what the component drawings of the first project look like, they look like this. So they all correspond to one element, but they're isolated from each other. And the way they were created was basically I took that original drawing, then recreated it, saved it out as copies, and then deleted all the elements I didn't want. This idea of having 18 drawings to make one composition is not that great. And that means that at 10 compositions we have 180 drawings. If it's the same level of complexity, at 100 we have 1,800 drawings. That's not great. At 180, I want 180 drawings will be enough to manage. Thank you very much. So this idea of being able to get into the structure of the drawing and use that as the container and modify the elements that are inside, they're defined by the artist as layers, very powerful for what we're doing, and it's been a part of the design idea of Novillo from the very beginning, but was kind of omitted because I just wanted a very simple way to get this first demo done. So again, a price that you pay for the individual file approach is that you need to have registration marks, which we can see in the corners of each one of these files, and these are shared by each one of the files. And that means that Novillo can see those and register those to each file comes in aligned in the correct way. By contrast, the original file also has those registration marks, that's where they all came from, but they're only used to define for Novillo how big the drawing is. If you remember from a previous video, the convention is that Novillo drawings are square because they have to orient themselves to the iPad as it rotates, or the iPhone, or whatever you're reading it on. So that original single drawing does have those marks as well. So you can use the individual file approach if it's useful, but the downside is that when those individual parts, those individual drawings start to change, if we refine them and make them cleaner or add the line work that is missing and so on and so forth, or just make more drastic changes, you have a bigger task to figure out if they all align with each other. If a line here ends where the other line begins, it's in a different drawing. So it kind of makes life difficult. Much better to have a single drawing which represents the composition or most of it. It could be, a mix of approaches, but for the most part in this sort of thing, I want one drawing and I want to be able to work everything in that side of that. So I think that what this shows is the default way of building drawings or building compositions inside of projects has got to be built around or dominated by single drawings, as few drawings as possible. So in practice, how did that work on the new project? Well, basically you can see down here in my selector for threads that I've created a thread for each one of the groups that I wanted to change things in. In this case, it was 5 of the hints and 1 piece of artwork because I was just trying things out. And then I went into the editing area, went into the initial conditions section, and changed the value for the color. And that's why when I load the thing, it doesn't animate because it's only initial condition set, but what you have is an initial color for each one. So once again, I mean, the UI is not keeping up with the changes in the back end of the functionality because I haven't done that work yet. What you're seeing here is really me rolling out functionality as it begins to work. But you can see here that we are in the edit panel, and that edit panel is being focused on the particular group that I have selected in the thread that I'm editing. So there you go. Okay, so again, this has not been tested extensively. I'm really just showing you this initial functionality as it rolls out, but I think the next demo is going to be one where I basically take this project with a single file and recreate something similar to the Novillo changes that you saw in the first one. It won't be identical, but it'll be similar. And I want to basically continue to edit this single file based composition just to, make a point of comparison. In this area here, just to continue this a little bit, I'm going to bring up the interface. You can see that I've started to do some other thinking about choices, selections that can be made within the scope of a drawing. So in the area to the left at the bottom, I've got an area where I'm looking at the possibility of creating a selector for line thickness. So the idea would be, in addition to focusing on a particular group inside of a particular drawing or a particular block, I can then say, and now I want to select those lines that are between this range of thicknesses, which can be very, very powerful. Below that, I'm looking at an idea of selecting them with using color, but I've sort of rejected that, and now what I'm looking at is, because I've worked out a way to do this, selecting lines on the basis of their length. So think how powerful that would be when you can just select, for example, the lines that are used for hatching because they're all short, or the lines that are used for like stippling or drawing out a beard or something like that, or just selecting the very long lines and having them animate over the entire length of the composition, and doing that in an easy way without having to kind of just isolate each line as a separate layer or whatever. I think it's going to be really powerful and very, very granular. And while there's no kind of plan or idea of creating something that is down to the level of the individual line just yet, I think you can, in practical terms, get very close to this just using the selectors that I've developed here now. Okay, I guess that's it for today's video. I'm pretty pleased with this. This is a return to something that was built into Novillo in the beginning, tested and was shown to work, but I took it out for, as I say, building the initial demo when I was restructuring the whole data underlying, underpinnings of the app starting back in September. Now we're past all that, and I'm bringing some of this functionality back in. That's kind of, for me, a great start for the next demo, and so look forward to that. I'm Dan. No funny ending today. Fooled you. But thanks for watching. And, I think the most compelling thing I can do is produce something that is a story, and I'll be thinking about that too. But for now, if you find this interesting and you want to be part of a beta test group, let me know. I'd love to hear from you.